I've seen many Elden Ring lore theory videos on YouTube claim that this statue represents Radagon. Many of them came out just recently, within the last year, even after the Shadows of the Erdtree DLC. If these theories are right, this statue depicts the second Elden Lord. What does that mean to the history of the game and our search for clues on who Radagon really is? Welcome. This is the fourth video in a series I call Radagon is Loki, where we combine evidence found in Elden Ring with religious iconography, Norse mythology, and other sources to try and solve the puzzle which stumped the ever-brilliant Gold Mask. Who was Radagon? In my first video, we explored the many similarities between Radagon and Loki, the trickster god of deception from Norse mythology. The one dissimilarity between the two is that while Loki plotted the death of Baldur, the most beloved of the Aesir gods, Radagon has no apparent connection to a similar event in Elden Ring. Instead, his daughter Ranni stole a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith, the Black Blade, shadow-bound half-brother of Queen Marika the Eternal, and imbued its power into the daggers of the Black Knife assassins, who carried out the fell deed of carving the curse mark of death into the back of Godwyn the Golden. In my subsequent videos, we analyzed two locations in Elden Ring: the Church of Pilgrimage in the Weeping Peninsula and the Stormcaller Church on the Altus Plateau. Both churches are locations where the usual statues of Queen Marika the Eternal have been replaced by statues of Radagon, depicting him as second Elden Lord and the creator of Golden Order fundamentalism. From these analyses, we have determined that the items and enemies surrounding these locations appear to indicate connections between Radagon and Godwyn, in life, in his assassination, and in his new role as the Prince of Death. This series explores the question: did Radagon have a hand in plotting the Night of the Black Knives and the demise of Godwyn the Golden? Did he trick his children, Ranni and Rykard, into carrying out this plot, as Loki framed the blind god Hodor? And did Radagon successfully erase all evidence of his connection? If this statue represents Radagon, as other lore theorists speculate, then I believe this calls for an analysis of this statue, its placements throughout the lands between, and the implications for the Night of the Black Knives and the story of Elden Ring. If you're a supporter of this theory, I think you're in for a big surprise. Upon starting a game of Elden Ring and exiting the Chapel of Anticipation, we come upon this intriguing statue depicting a hooded man holding a sword. We have no idea who this man is or who he represents, but statues play an important storytelling role in Elden Ring, where the history of the lands between is considered fractured, and many parts are lost to time. This person's identity and their role in the lands between is also lost, because by the end of the game, we still do not find any items, text, or bits of dialogue that tell us for certain who this is. So, we must look for environmental clues. A few hours later, we find a bridge spanning a long ravine in the northern part of Limgrave. The bridge is lined with statues depicting the character we first saw at the Precipice of Anticipation, though many of them are broken and have fallen over. A site of grace on the west side of the bridge is named Saint's Bridge, and so it is that this statue is often referred to as the Saint. I'll be taking the same liberty for the rest of this video. Outside of the game, I was able to find several stock images of medieval statues depicting knights, kingly figures, executioners, and even angels holding a sword in a similar pose. Any of these might have served as the real-world inspiration for this statue. But then I found this image and stopped dead in my tracks. This is not a statue from the medieval period. It is a statue outside the entrance of the Middlesex Guildhall in Westminster, central London. This is a historic court building which now houses the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. The building dates to the early 1800s but was heavily remodeled in the early 1900s. That's likely when this statue would have been added, depicting a hooded person holding a sword, in a pose very like the figure of the saint we find throughout Elden Ring. While the similarities to the saint are very striking, the differences are also notable. The saint is very masculine in appearance, but this statue appears to be female. She is posted on the right side of the Middlesex Guildhall entrance, while another statue is posted to the left. Around both statues are friezes depicting certain historical scenes in relief, such as the signing of the Magna Carta, the charter to the Abbey of Westminster, and Lady Jane Grey being offered the crown before her eventual arrest and subsequent beheading. The first statue holds a tower and key, and is thought to represent prudence, the concept of careful judgment and discretion to avoid harm and achieve good outcomes. This statue is likely meant to represent the concept of reason in justice, whereby people must use logical thinking and judgment to understand facts and find cause or explanation for actions, beliefs, or events before coming to conclusions. The sword she carries, the Sword of Reason, symbolizes intellect, logic, and sound judgment cutting through deception, solving problems, and achieving victory or justice. The sword held by the saint in Elden Ring highly resembles the Iron Greatsword, although it is not a perfect match. There are both low-res versions of this statue and higher detail versions, such as those found at the Divine Bridges throughout the game. The sword held by the saint has finer detail, such as this notch in the center of the crossguard, and what looks like flower petals at the top of the grip. The pommel at the end of the grip also has a more intricate design than the one held by the saint. Interestingly, the Iron Greatsword is wielded by, and a rare drop from, the lesser misbegotten warriors found in Lanedale, Royal Capital, as well as Miquella's Halig Tree. These are regular enemy versions of the bosses encountered at Castle Morn, Redmane Castle with a Crucible Knight, and the unsightly catacombs with Perfumer Trisha, as well as the Misbegotten Crusader, the version who wields and drops the Golden Order Greatsword, the sword reforged by Radagon himself after he left Liurnia, left Rennala, and returned to the Erdtree capital to found the Golden Order Fundamentalists, as a way to reboot the failing Golden Order. We covered in a previous video how these red-haired monsters might be Radagon's direct offspring, created while he was shapeshifting, just as Loki was often said to do in several tales from Norse mythology. So, the saint holding the same sword held by Radagon's potential chimeric offspring is basically point one that this statue might be Radagon. But will this theory score any higher? We already covered the precipice of anticipation, except I'd like to add that this area was clearly once a part of Stormveil Castle. The precipice must have been ripped away during seismic events. The lion motifs and the gargoyles resembling stormhawks on the walls confirm this, as well as the fact that we find the Stormhawk King and the Stormhawk Dean ashes here on a return visit. I think the most likely place the two areas would have been connected would have been this ledge at the bottom of the tall tower where the Rampart Tower Site of Grace is located. This corner section of wall has architectural adornments that clearly match the Chapel of Anticipation, indicating a secondary structure was once in front of the chapel, but was destroyed during an earthquake. The other wall in this section has architecture that matches only that of Godric's boss fight arena, and I'm baffled as to how this section of the wall got all the way down here. We don't find any statues of saints on the grounds of Stormveil Castle. The only one we find is fallen and cracked in the courtyard near this omen and its Leal Hound. If we lure the troll away from Godric's area back to this location, we can bait the monster into breaking this statue, and then we can collect smithing stones from it. There are several of these cracked saints scattered throughout the lands between, always located near large enemies like trolls, or rune bears, or golems, which you must lure over to the statue to break it, so you can collect the smithing stones inside. I don't think there's any lore significance to these statues, except that this one was likely to be dragged over to this ledge to be cast into the pit with the others, but the servants forgot it. The rest of the cracked saint statues found throughout the lands between are placed with such randomness that there's little sense to it, so I won't be analyzing them. Like I said, we do find a pile of broken and discarded saints far below Stormveil in the pit that runs along the interior of the western outer wall. There are parts of maybe 10 saint statues here. The others depict a maiden, likely Marika herself. Among the 10 saint statues, there are sword-carrying kinds as well as a book-reading variant. We can see the full version of this variant statue at the Limgrave Tower Bridge, and I'll get back to it in a second. While it's unclear where in the castle all of these statues were pulled from, we can see that 5 of the book-reading variants were pulled from these alcoves above the gatehouse out front of Godric's arena. These statues were likely discarded here on Godric's orders, years, following his defeat at the royal capital during the Shattering and his retreat to Limgrave. He took up residence in Stormveil, plotting to become the lord of all that is golden by continuing the art of grafting body parts to himself. Godric doesn't mention Marika or Radagon, so his allegiances were likely to Godfrey and the Golden lineage. So for him to cast these likenesses of Marika and the Saint into the pit near the outer walls is very interesting. We must figure out why Godric did this to figure out who this is. We are lucky, then, that Godric was perhaps cowardly enough not to deface the saint statues at the Limgrave Tower Bridge so that we can see both the sword-carrying and book-reading variants in full. The book-reading variant is dressed differently, and his face is distinctly shaped, which leads me to believe this statue depicts an entirely different person. The entrances are the same at both tower bridges in Lanedale, Royal Capital, and both entrances must be reached by riding up large elevators, whose walls are lined with dozens of copies of the saint. The same is true in the Carrion Study Hall, but the elevator has been removed. The Carrions instead chose to use magic to invert the building interior if someone placed the right statue on the table near the entrance. The Carrions did not remove the saint statues, however. Instead, they incorporated them into the new design of the interior, and the exterior as well, since you can find the book-reading saint decorating the outside of the tower. While Godric ordered these statues removed from Stormveil, the Carrions reused them in their new design. Because as Muriel, pastor of Vows, says,
"Heresy is not native to the world. It is but a contrivance. All things can be conjoined."
This philosophy of the Carrions was remodeled into the very study hall. According to YouTuber Tarnished Archaeologist, the Divine Towers are some of the oldest structures in the lands between, predating the Bestial Sanctum and Farm Azula. And he is an archaeologist and historian, so I'm inclined to take his word. The Divine Towers are built from huge, ornately carved rocks, much like the pillars and bridges of raw ancient ruins. These civilizations were likely originally built by the Titans, the giants who predate the fire giants and the trolls, whose skeletons are visible throughout Caelid and the mountaintops of the giants. The Divine Towers were likely places of worship for the god of the fire giants, the Fell God, as he is now called. Each Divine Tower is decorated with the gifts of the heavens, or meteorites. Each tower is topped with 8 pillars, each inset with a meteorite surrounded by 8 circles. We see a similar pattern in the eye of the Fell God, which opens in the chest of the last remaining fire giant when we battle him. The armors of the fire monks and the Black Flame monks depict a similar one-eyed face in the chest, and the one-eyed shield is also said to depict a malformed one-eyed god. Once worshipped by the giants, this evil deity is believed to have been slain by Queen Marika. The tower bridges connecting to the Divine Towers were built much later by smaller, human-sized builders who used bricks as their main medium. This means these bridges were built at a point when mankind had free reign to repurpose the Divine Towers for their own uses, and chose to make them serve the 2 fingers, the envoys and oracles of the greater will. This conversion most likely occurred before Marika's reign, because there is a painting at Stormveil, in a room just west of the Liftside Chamber site of grace, that depicts the Divine Tower and the Tower Bridge of Limgrave standing tall long before the construction of the castle, even before the raising of the Erd Tree. The sealed tunnel in the capital outskirts southwest of Lanedale is an extremely interesting place. Several tunnels end with illusory walls, indicating that someone wanted to keep out intrepid explorers. The boss chamber has an ornate entranceway, but one that was clearly created by humans. The interior is surrounded by saint statues. Embedded in the floor of the chamber is a large meteorite. The stone rings carved in the floor around it are identical to the ones we see atop the Divine Towers. This cements for us that the Divine Towers were once topped with large meteorites, but were replaced with dirt and the two fingers. And this also gives us an idea how long ago the boss chamber of the sealed tunnel was first discovered. This cave exits to the exterior, where a short land bridge connects to the base of the Divine Tower of West Altus. Why doesn't this Divine Tower have a tower bridge like the others? I think that at one point it certainly did. The saints that once decorated that bridge were stored in the sealed cave, waiting for the day when the tower bridge would be rebuilt. The reason there is no longer a tower bridge connecting to this Divine Tower is because some great cataclysm struck the tower ages ago. All the Divine Towers have a layer of rock sediment on their east sides, indicating that a large asteroid struck the lands between long ago, somewhere far or farum to the east of the Divine Towers. By examining the areas on each tower where they connect to their respective bridges, we can see that this rock formation, likely created by molten lava thrown on the side of the tower, also covers parts of the tower bridge. This means the tower bridges were already connected to the Divine Towers when this cataclysmic event occurred. In the case of the Divine Tower of West Altus, there was likely a tower bridge connecting from where the Divine Bridge ends to where an elevator tower used to stand, identical to the one on the east side of Lanedell, but standing approximately where the Minor Erdtree Church now rests. One would ride the elevator down to the level of the Divine Tower of West Altus Gate, then head southeast across another tower bridge. But following the asteroid strike, the entire elevator tower and the tower bridges were wiped out by flying debris and magma. The lower tower bridge is likely completely covered with this rock and sediment. We can still see the remains of the upper tower bridge on the west side of Lanedell, and we can access it either by teleporting from the Tower of Return in the Weeping Peninsula, or by riding the elevator from the west courtyard of the fortified manor. It is interesting that a Divine Tower without a bridge provides more information than those that do. If only we had more information about the isolated Divine Tower and the Divine Tower of Caelid and why they don't have tower bridges. We can only theorize that this was because both the eastern towers are located far into the region that was once dominated by the kingdom of the ancient dragons and the beasts, including the Bestial Sanctum and Farum Great Bridge. And yet, both Divine Towers have their own two fingers at the top, which would surely be grounds for the building of tower bridges to each. Perhaps there are no bridges because the ancient dragons who serve the two fingers could merely fly up to these towers to speak with the fingers. Saints also lined the collapsed bridge that once spanned the chasm between Liurnia and Limgrave. A carriage is stuck on the north side, with a chest containing a tree spear. If these hapless wandering nobles weren't aware this bridge was out and still thought they could cross it with their caravan, then this indicates the bridge collapse might have been a recent event. I wonder if Margit might have had a hand in destroying the bridge to block the Tarnished from crossing into Liurnia easily. Or perhaps Godric ordered his men to destroy the bridge during the Shattering to impede Melania's progress into the region. The forest-spanning Great Bridge is another example. This bridge too has collapsed because the entire area below it, between the Mirage Rise and the Woodfolk Ruins, appears to be slowly sinking. The Saints Bridge near Mount Gelmir is another example of this, where it appears seismic activity has raised up the western portion. The Saints also decorate the Capital Rampart Bridge, which is the bridge on the northwest side of Lanedell. This is the bridge we use to enter the capital for the first time, after defeating the Draconic Tree Sentinel blocking the entrance. The brickwork on this bridge clearly demonstrates that it was built at a different time than the surrounding structures. Likely at the same time the fortified manor dominated the royal capital, when this place was still an eternal city. At this point in our analysis, it would be easy to think that this statue represents some kind of saint of bridges, protecting and reassuring travelers who might be hesitant to cross for fear of collapse. He might also represent a forgotten hero, influential enough to convince the Eternal Cities, the most likely ruling empire of the world before the Golden Order, to build bridges connecting to the Divine Towers and thereby spread the influence of the Two Fingers and the Greater Will. But we're not ready for our conclusions yet. We have 4 more locations where the saint appears we must analyze. The Church of Vows in eastern Liurnia is one of the most lore-heavy sites in the entire game, and one of the more confusing. I think the environmental evidence presented at this church is also what convinces a lot of people that this statue represents Radagon. We also get a huge lore dump from Muriel, pastor of Vows, the giant turtle pope, who tells us how awesome Radagon is, how awesome it is to use celestial dew and achieve absolution here in the church, all the while sidestepping the fact that absolution is doing a mind wipe of an already injured party. It is a further transgression to erase the previous one, but I already covered absolution and Radagon's use of it in my previous video. Today, we're going to examine the statues in this location and what they tell us. 6 saint statues are arranged around the pool of absolution. These are the very same variety as the sword-holding saints, but the swords in their hands have been replaced with torches. This is the only location in the game where we see this variety of saints, and so we must believe that the Carians are responsible for customizing these statues. Muriel makes it seem as though this is where Radagon and Renala were wed, and being surrounded by statues holding swords during the nuptials would obviously have been inappropriate. When torches are depicted in art, they typically symbolize enlightenment, knowledge, freedom, hope, and guidance. All things Muriel actively works to provide us. The idea of the Carians, or even Radagon himself perhaps, altering the look of these statues is reinforced by the fact that we find Radagon's golden tailoring tools and his gold sewing needle here, both items which are used to alter the appearance of demigod clothing. No, he wouldn't have used this needle to change the statues, but I find the placement of this item here definitely symbolic. In the pool of absolution stands a statue of a Nox monk, holding what looks like a chalice. We know this is a Nox monk because when we explore Nox Stella, we see this same statue. These statues line bridges and important stairways, much like what we see the saint doing at the tower bridges and other bridges. But let's come back to this later, after analyzing a few more areas. One more statue stands in this area, behind Muriel. This cloaked statue with her hand out appears one time only in Elden Ring, here at the Church of Vows. This same statue appears twice in Dark Souls 3 apparently, at Lothric Castle and in the painted world of Ariandel. I wouldn't know since I've started but never finished Dark Souls 3. But for players who have, this statue's inclusion at this location in Elden Ring apparently confirmed for DS3 players that this cloaked figure is Velka, goddess of sin, who has appeared in statue form in all 3 Dark Souls games. As a goddess, Velka defines what constitutes a sin and administers the punishment. In Dark Souls 3, her statue could be used for absolution, just like the Nox statue at the Church of Vows. But in Elden Ring, she appears to be here just to oversee. Still, this statue's placement here is a major reason why several people theorize that the saint statue represents Radagon. There are similarities between Radagon and Velka as well, such as his Law of Causality spell in Golden Order Fundamentalism being a cheap copy of Velka's Karmic Justice spell. But again, I don't know enough about Dark Souls to go further into why this statue is here, except for the similarities regarding absolution. While I agree the appearance of the saint here sends some mixed signals, I don't believe his inclusion here tells us anything further about him, except that his likeness is not offensive to the Carians. The Cathedral of Manasellus in the Moonlight Altar Plateau is another location where we find the saint statues. After we give Ranni the Finger Slayer blade, she and her dragon pet, Ajula, travel to these ruins so she can complete her objective. The name Manasellus is Latin for heavenly hand, and so I think it's no coincidence that we find Ranni's 2 fingers here, as well as her doll body, divested of her soul essence after using the Finger Slayer blade to slay this creature, located in a cave deep below the transept. The naming of this cathedral leads me to believe that Rani's two fingers, being the heavenly hand, were always located here. The main purpose of this structure is to communicate with the two fingers, and thereby commune with the greater will. This is an additional piece of information not just about this statue, but about the Carian royal family, or perhaps the astrologers. Manus Celis is built upon the highest landmass in Liurnia, so high in fact that you can see the moon in the sky even at noon in the day, and the entire cathedral is full of starlight shards. The entire purpose of this structure is stargazing and communicating with the cosmos, and it appears to have been a place for listening to the wisdom of the two fingers and communicating with the greater will. But this structure is mostly rubble and reduced to ruins, indicating that perhaps the Carians no longer came here, because they were no longer interested in what the greater will or the two fingers had to say. Not since the rise of Marika and the Golden Order, or Radagon's invasions of Liurnia. We find an unruined version of this exact same structure in the Realm of Shadow, during the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. When examining the Cathedral of Manus Meter from afar, we can see that only the center tower is destroyed. Otherwise, we get a better sense of what Manus Celis looked like in its prime, covered with every size of saint statues at every level. This many saints covering the cathedrals probably indicate who this statue is more than anything. Inside we meet Count Ymir, High Priest. He is a glintstone sorcerer and offers to sell sorceries, but he also proclaims himself to be a child of the greater will. The description of his hat says, in part, the following. The circular design at the top represents the greater will and its lightless abyss. So we understand that even though Ymir is a sorcerer and was a member of the Carian royal family, he's turned away from the moon and become a high priest in service to the greater will. Ymir gives the Tarnished the hole-laden necklace and a series of maps depicting the two finger ruins in the Realm of Shadow. The Tarnished must visit each location and blow the horn hanging from the center, although Ymir refers to it as a bell. Once the Tarnished has done that, Ymir will disappear from his throne. Examining it, we can find and push a button that reveals a secret trapdoor under the chair. Descending the long ladder, we find another bell to ring, and doing so teleports us to an arena wherein we fight Meter, Mother of Fingers. Her remembrance states, the mother of all two fingers and finger creepers was in turn a magnificently gleaming daughter of the greater will, and the first shooting star to fall upon the lands between. When we return to the cathedral and examine Ymir's throne again, we must fight Sword Hand of Knight Jolan and then Count Ymir, Mother of Fingers. Now we see his full plan as he attempts to bring it to fruition. All along, Ymir has been using us to unseal the pocket dimension that Meter concealed herself within. Believing Marika and the fingers that guided her to be unhinged, Ymir needs us to kill Meter so that he could become the new Mother of Fingers.
Do you recall what I said? That Marika and the fingers that guided her were unsound from the start? Well, the truth lies deeper still. It is their mother who is damaged and unhinged. The fingers are but unripe children, victims in their own right. We all need a mother, do we not? A new mother. A true mother who will not give birth to further malady.
But all of this is madness, and a digression from our purpose in this video. Here again, we have a structure decorated with saint statues that was built to house the divine fingers, this time the first and foremost of the finger monsters, the mother of them all. Like the Cathedral of Manus Celis, it is a construction of either the Carians or the astrologers who predate them. Here we encounter a former Carian family member who has turned away from his reverence of the moon. He seems to have returned to the philosophy that the astrologers once abided by, that Meter was divine, and spoke for the greater will to instruct the astrologers on how to live. All these structures appear to have been erected in service of the two fingers and the greater will. So, as unfathomable as it may seem in the post-Golden Order present, the astrologers, sorcerers, and the Carians all once served the two fingers. We now have enough information about this statue, based on the locations where we find it, to draw our conclusions. We just have one more location to cover before all is revealed. There are 2 more saint statues in Noxtella, Eternal City. We encounter them just as we're about to leave Noxtella by taking the lift down to the Noxtella Waterfall Basin Site of Grace. Like I mentioned earlier, we see similar Nox monk statues lining the bridges and stairways of the Eternal Cities, holding braziers that burn ghost flame. But here, and only here, we find 2 saints instead. Given that all the other saints and their locations are tied directly to the 2 fingers, the appearance of these statues among the Nox seems a little suspect. But if you consider everything we've uncovered so far, maybe it's not. The saint first appears at the precipice of anticipation, an isolated and forgotten place that no one can reach. We find his statues at Stormveil Castle, removed from their original locations and dumped into a pit near the outer wall, discarded along with what appear to be statues of Queen Marika, indicating that neither she nor the patron saint of the 2 fingers are of any further use to Godric the Grafted. We also see these statues as well as their book-reading variants adorning the tower bridges, built long after the towers themselves were first constructed by the Titans of a long-forgotten mythological age. Though the towers were built to commune with another god, the fell god of the giant's flame, they were repurposed to each house a 2 fingers, just like the one we commune with at the Round Table Hold, where we also find saint statues. It's possible these statues once adorned all bridges in the lands between, so the saint could reassure travelers and make them feel safe in crossing. But as the bridge under Stormveil reveals, not even the blessings of the 2 fingers could guarantee structural integrity forever. These statues still stand in the Carian Study Hall, even though the 2 fingers and their messages from the Greater Will were co-opted by the Golden Order. The Carians have chosen not to discard this symbolic icon of their heritage. The saint, after all, represented the interests of the ancient astrologers. Although the tower bridge to the Divine Tower of West Altus was destroyed, the statues that once adorned it are preserved in an underground cave. Clearly, the saint was once an indispensable figure in history, even if he is forgotten now. And these statues decorate the outsides of the 2 massive cathedrals, one erected in the Moonlight Altar region to house the 2 fingers of the Moonfolk, who were most likely the astrologer ancestors of the Carians. The other cathedral erected at the crash site of a divine being from the cosmos, one who came to prepare the way to herald the arrival of the Elden Beast, the vassal of the Greater Will and the living incarnation of the concept of order. Remember that the Shadow Realm was once part of the Lands Between but was later removed and veiled by Queen Marika. The most likely spot for its original location is between all the Divine Towers. Finally, that's why these saint statues are left intact here by the Nox, who also populated the Eternal Cities along with the astrologers, but were forced underground by Queen Marika. To the Nox, these might represent their anointed ancestors, who once tried to serve the Greater Will, or maybe they serve as a reminder of what was lost. Long before the Elden Beast and the Golden Order, the astrologers who lived in the Eternal Cities looked to the cosmos above. They read fate in the stars and are said to be heirs of the glintstone sorcerers. But alas, the night sky no longer cradles fate. They watch the stars also rain down upon the lands between, bringing various types of glintstone and magic and cosmic beings they considered to be divine. The astrologers built the cathedrals to honor Meter, their new stellar guest, and her children, the 2 fingers. The finger reader crones communed with Meter and the 2 fingers to learn their language, and that's why many are dressed in robes like those worn by the astrologers and the sorcerers of Raya Lucaria. And the astrologers built the tower bridges to connect to the Divine Towers, replacing the massive meteors that once sat atop each with their own 2 fingers, so that these alien creatures could commune with the Greater Will night and day, and entreat with it to send its vassal to the lands between. That's probably only part of the story, but it's all we need to understand who this statue represents. No, this is not Radagon. This statue likely predates Radagon by several hundred years. This statue represents the astrologers, the ones who welcome and revered the Mother of Fingers and her children, and who wanted to help her communicate with her cosmic father, the Greater Will, to send even more divine powers to the lands between. This saint likely commemorates a forgotten servant of Metter, Mother of Fingers, and her children, possibly a count himself, like Emir, but minus the crazies. Compare the book reading version of the statue to the astrologer set of armor, and the similarities are hard to ignore. This sword-carrying variant is very close to what might have been an early confessor, who are now little more than assassins dispatched by the Round Table Hold to police the Tarnished. Though the results of my analysis might not be what you hoped for, and though we haven't made any further connections between Radagon and the history of the lands between, I felt that this was a highly valuable exercise and provided me, at least, with a better sense of the timeline of events before the Elden Ring came to the lands between. Thanks to Tarnished Archaeologist for his fantastic series on the architecture of the lands between. If you enjoyed this video, then please click the like button, and thank you for watching. My next video will be a comparison between the children of Radagon and Marika and their godly parents, and will likely round out this series. If you're interested in catching that video, please subscribe and turn on notifications.